a mother, a nurse, 3 innocent children. In less than 30 minutes, an ordinary family home became the scene of an unimaginable tragedy that shocked America. Was Lindsay Clancy a cold-blooded killer who carefully planned the murders of her own children, or was she suffering from a devastating mental health crisis that completely shattered her reality? The answer may forever divide public opinion. This is the tragic and controversial case of Lindsay Clancy. On January 24, 2023, the quiet town of Duxbury, Massachusetts, became the center of one of the most shocking true crime stories in recent American history. A story that would spark debates about postpartum psychosis, mental illness, criminal responsibility, and whether a mother suffering from severe psychiatric problems can truly understand the actions she is taking. What really happened inside the Clancy family home that night? And why are prosecutors and defense attorneys fighting so fiercely over what caused this unimaginable tragedy? Let's find out. Before this tragedy, Lindsay Clancy appeared to have what many people would describe as a perfect life. She was a labor and delivery nurse at Massachusetts General Hospital, one of the most respected hospitals in the country. Every day, she helped mothers bring new life into the world. Friends, family members, and people who knew her described her as intelligent, caring, and deeply devoted to her children. She was married to Patrick Clancy, and together they were raising their 3 young children in the peaceful town of Duxbury. Their children were 5-year-old Cora, 3-year-old Dawson, and 8-month-old Callan. From the outside, they looked like a happy family. But behind closed doors, Lindsay was reportedly struggling with serious mental health issues after giving birth to her youngest child. Over time, she began receiving psychiatric treatment. According to court records and reports from both legal teams, she had been prescribed multiple psychiatric medications. She reportedly suffered from severe anxiety, depression, and troubling thoughts that concerned both her and the people treating her. Her defense team would later argue that Lindsay was suffering from postpartum psychosis, one of the most severe psychiatric emergencies that can affect women after childbirth. Postpartum psychosis is extremely rare but potentially life-threatening. Women suffering from this condition may experience hallucinations, delusions, severe confusion, paranoia, and a complete loss of touch with reality. Some individuals may become suicidal. Others may become unable to understand the consequences of their actions. Mental health experts consider postpartum psychosis a medical emergency that requires immediate treatment. The defense claims that Lindsay's mental health had deteriorated significantly in the weeks leading up to the tragedy. They argue that doctors failed to recognize the severity of her condition and that she was overmedicated while desperately seeking help. However, prosecutors see the situation very differently. According to the prosecution, this was not a sudden psychiatric break that left Lindsay unable to understand her actions. Instead, they argue that the evidence points toward intentional and deliberate conduct. And that disagreement is at the center of this heartbreaking case. January 24, 2023, began like an ordinary day for the Clancy family. There were no signs that the day would end in unimaginable tragedy. At some point during the evening, Lindsay asked her husband, Patrick, to leave the house to pick up takeout food and medication from a nearby store. Patrick later complied and left the family home for what was expected to be a short trip. Prosecutors would later argue that Lindsay intentionally created an opportunity to be alone with the children. Patrick was reportedly gone for only a brief period of time. During those moments, prosecutors alleged that Lindsay carried out the unthinkable. Authorities later stated that she used exercise resistance bands to strangle her 3 young children inside the family home: 5-year-old Cora, 3-year-old Dawson, and 8-month-old Callan. The details of what happened inside that house are difficult to comprehend. The children were eventually found suffering from devastating injuries. Emergency responders rushed to the scene after Patrick returned home and discovered the horrifying situation. But the tragedy did not end there. After the attack, Lindsay allegedly attempted to take her own life by jumping from a second-story window of the family home. The fall caused catastrophic spinal injuries. Although she survived, she was left permanently paralyzed from the waist down and now relies on a wheelchair. Emergency medical teams rushed everyone involved to nearby hospitals. Sadly, 8-month-old Callan died shortly after arriving at the hospital. Cora and Dawson initially survived their injuries but passed away over the following days despite medical efforts to save them. The causes of death were ultimately determined to be homicide by asphyxia. The entire country was stunned. How could a labor and delivery nurse allegedly kill her own children? And perhaps even more confusing, how could someone described as a loving mother suddenly commit such a horrific act? Almost immediately, questions surrounding Lindsay's mental health began to emerge. As investigators continued gathering evidence, prosecutors filed serious criminal charges against Lindsay Clancy. She was charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder. She also faces charges related to strangulation and suffocation, along with additional assault-related charges connected to the deaths of her children. Under Massachusetts law, a conviction for first-degree murder carries a mandatory sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole. From the very beginning, however, Lindsay's defense team made it clear that their case would not be focused on whether she committed the acts themselves. Instead, they argue that Lindsay was not criminally responsible because she was suffering from severe postpartum psychosis. This distinction is incredibly important. The legal issue in this case is not simply whether Lindsay killed her children. The primary legal question is whether she understood what she was doing and whether she understood that her actions were morally and legally wrong at the time. If a person is found legally insane under Massachusetts law, criminal responsibility becomes a much more complicated issue. The defense argues that Lindsay's actions were the result of a catastrophic psychiatric illness. They point to extensive medical records showing that she sought psychiatric treatment before the tragedy. They say she repeatedly asked for help. They claim she experienced suicidal thoughts, severe anxiety, and psychiatric symptoms that worsened over time. According to reports, she had been prescribed numerous medications intended to treat depression, anxiety, and sleep problems. Her attorneys argue that the combination of severe postpartum illness and medication effects contributed to her deteriorating mental state. They also argue that she was suffering from psychosis at the time of the killings. Psychosis can affect a person's ability to distinguish reality from delusion. Individuals experiencing psychosis may genuinely believe things that are not true or become disconnected from reality itself. The defense intends to present expert psychiatric testimony explaining how postpartum psychosis may have affected Lindsay's mental state during the incident. But prosecutors strongly disagree. The prosecution argues that Lindsay demonstrated planning and awareness before the killings. One of their central arguments is that she allegedly arranged for Patrick to leave the house, providing an opportunity to carry out the murders while she was alone with the children. Prosecutors have also referenced evidence that they argue shows consciousness of her actions. They maintain that Lindsay understood exactly what she was doing and that mental illness does not automatically excuse criminal conduct. Throughout the legal proceedings, prosecutors have consistently rejected the idea that Lindsay met the legal standard for insanity. As the case progressed, investigators reviewed thousands of pages of medical records and psychiatric evaluations. Both the prosecution and defense retained their own expert witnesses, psychiatrists, psychologists, medical professionals, mental health specialists. Each side is expected to present highly technical testimony regarding Lindsay's mental condition before, during, and after the incident. This means the upcoming trial is likely to become a battle of medical experts. The jury will not only hear about what happened inside the Clancy home but also about the complex science behind postpartum mental illness. Medical professionals recognize postpartum psychosis as one of the most severe psychiatric emergencies associated with childbirth. Although it is rare, it can develop rapidly and may include hallucinations, delusions, severe depression, mania, and suicidal thoughts. Some women suffering from postpartum psychosis require emergency hospitalization because they may pose a danger to themselves or others. Supporters of Lindsay argue that this tragedy highlights serious problems in maternal mental health care. They believe the healthcare system failed to properly identify and treat her worsening psychiatric symptoms. Others strongly disagree. Critics argue that mental illness should not be used to excuse the intentional killing of innocent children. They point out that countless individuals struggle with depression and anxiety without harming others. The case has therefore become one of the most emotionally charged criminal proceedings in recent years. Public opinion remains sharply divided. Some people view Lindsay Clancy primarily as a mother suffering from a severe psychiatric illness. Others view her primarily as a murderer who intentionally killed her children. The debate has continued for years as court proceedings move forward. During the years following the tragedy, Lindsay underwent extensive medical and psychiatric evaluations. Multiple pretrial hearings were held to address various legal issues surrounding the upcoming trial. Because of the complexity of the case, both sides have filed numerous motions concerning evidence, expert witnesses, and testimony that may be presented before the jury. More recently, Lindsay appeared in court during motion hearings regarding witness testimony. Observers noted that she appeared emotional during the proceedings and was seen wiping away tears. Attorneys from both sides argued over whether certain witnesses should be allowed or restricted from testifying during the trial. Rather than immediately ruling on every disputed witness, the judge stated that he would make many of those decisions during the trial itself after hearing directly from the witnesses. This means several important questions regarding testimony remain unresolved. The trial is expected to involve highly emotional testimony from mental health experts, medical professionals, and investigators involved in the case. Jurors will likely be asked to examine difficult questions about mental illness and criminal responsibility. Did Lindsay understand the nature of her actions? Was she experiencing severe postpartum psychosis that prevented her from understanding right and wrong? Or did she knowingly and intentionally murder her 3 children? These are questions that only a jury will ultimately answer. One of the most heartbreaking aspects of this case involves Patrick Clancy. In the aftermath of the tragedy, Patrick publicly expressed both unimaginable grief over the loss of his children and compassion toward his wife. His public statement surprised many people across the country. Even while mourning Cora, Dawson, and Callan, Patrick spoke openly about Lindsay's struggles with mental illness. His words highlighted the emotional complexity surrounding this case. This was not simply a criminal investigation. It was also a family tragedy involving profound loss, mental illness, and questions that may never have easy answers. Today, Lindsay Clancy remains charged with the murders of her 3 children. She has pleaded not guilty. The criminal proceedings continue as both sides prepare for trial. No final verdict has been reached. The case remains one of the most closely watched criminal trials involving postpartum psychosis in modern American legal history. Whatever the outcome, 3 innocent children lost their lives on that tragic night in January 2023. Cora, Dawson, and Callan. Their names remain at the center of this story. The Lindsay Clancy case has forced difficult conversations across America about maternal mental health, psychiatric treatment, criminal law, and the limits of the insanity defense. Some believe justice means holding Lindsay fully accountable. Others believe justice also requires recognizing the devastating impact of severe mental illness. For now, the courtroom will decide where the truth lies. And until that day comes, this heartbreaking case continues to raise one question that remains impossible to ignore. What truly happened inside that family home on January 24, 2023? Was it an act of intentional murder? Or was it the tragic consequence of a catastrophic mental health crisis? Only the evidence presented at trial will determine the answer. If you enjoyed this true crime documentary and want to see more real-life criminal cases explained in simple and detailed storytelling, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload.